Okay, guys, welcome to the first session of Readers Club here. My name is Pradeep, and thank you for connecting out here. Um, we are going live on Zoom as well as on the Clubhouse right now, um, where we're going to be talking about the first book, which is The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Um, the Readers Club, in fact, is primarily about talking about a book every week on week basis. This is our first session. We're super excited to have you all here. And let's see how many we got here. We already have two members who joined in the session right now. Hi, Sonali. Hi, Sonia. We also have a few of them on Clubhouse as we speak.
Hi, sir.
And yes, thank you for connecting out here. Let's see what we got. Okay. Thank you for joining in, Kavita. Welcome. All right. So we would have a few people on Clubhouse and we would have a few people on the Zoom call here. As I said, this is going to be a live session on both the elements. And honestly, I'm a little nervous and also I'm excited about this session. I'm sure you would be equally excited. All right. So let's see what we got here. Okay, today's book is the first book, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Let me just quickly lay down the agenda of why I chose the book. So while most of you are aware that this is the one book I've been talking about for the last decade plus, in fact, somewhere my training journey started with this book. And why do I talk about the seven habits? It's a very simple. It's a very simple thing. First, we build our habits, and then our habits build us. Um, Primarily, we are what our habits are. So whether it's in the area of finance, whether it's in the area of health, whether it's in terms of relationships, our day-to-day activities is designed. And in fact, you would be surprised to know that almost 70-80% of the day, the tasks that we do are most of them automated. And this automation happens when we develop a particular habit. So let's talk about the book, The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. Um, and when I talk about this book, I want to highlight, the introduction of the book first. So this book is a transition from becoming independent from a dependent stage. So Dr. Covey talks about the three different stages that we are into. And the first one, of course, is the dependent stage. And this is across our life. Let's say as a small kid, as a kid, we are always dependent on our parents, and from, being dependent on them right from food, our protection, our education, everything, we slowly move to a independent stage. And from there, we move to a interdependent stage. So in the corporate life as well, when we start working, in the initial stages, we are dependent on, you know, um, the knowledge transformation that happens where we get to know our job profile, we get the on-job training, and we are still dependent on our manager, or our team leader who will tell us what to do, and we need that time. And over a period of time, maybe 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line, from a dependent stage, we move to the independent stage. And from there onwards, we don't need to be told what we have to do. And from there, we move to the next level, which is interdependence. And that's what the whole book is divided into. But before we dive in the book, there is an interesting concept that Dr. Covey talks about, and I want to highlight that here especially. Um, so there are two eras that he talks about. One is pre-1920s, and the second is post-1920s. So he emphasizes that pre-1920s, there was a lot of emphasis on the character side of the person. So when we talked about organizational leaders, or when we talk about personal leaderships, we talk about the core characters. And post 1920s, there was a lot of emphasis on the personality ethics. So in the earlier times, the whole idea was about integrity, about the temperance, the courage, the patience, modesty, and of course taking care of others, helping people to grow, etc. And from there it moved on to something called as a personality ethics, which was more about how others perceive you. So it was more about how others look at you in terms of your overall personality. That's like a public image, your attitude, your behavior. And if I were to relate that today, after so many years, 1920, of course, we're talking about almost a century back, but if we talk about that element, we still have that very prominent here. And if you see, the classic examples are the startup founders. Again, they're doing a phenomenal job. And the way we look at startup founders is when there is, a venture capitalist investing in a startup, or when there is an organization which raises a lot of funds. All of a sudden, it's in limelight and people celebrate that. So if you remember the recent incident of White Hat Junior, where Byju's pumped in a lot of money, and White Hat Junior started promoting a lot of activities. Another classic example is Zomato, and now Zomato has also gone public as an organization. We're celebrating those elements, and no doubt they need celebration, because yes, it in the competitive world today, um, they have set up a benchmark in terms of growth, etc. um, but the way it's celebrated, it looks like as if they have dug a gold mine. What is not highlighted is 90% of the startups. If you were to just look at the last almost 6, 7, 8 years of startups, nobody talks about this. And 90% of startups who raised funds earlier are nowhere in the market today. And yet there are organizations, and we have a principle based organization like Infosys, TCS, Reliance, just to name a few. The Mahindra Group, just to name a few of these companies. These are the companies who've been there, done that, and they've created a sustainable leadership, organization, a sustainable growth organization. And this comes under strong leaders like Mr. Murthy from Infosys, Shri Ratan Tata ji, the TCS and the Tata Group the head, and of course now Mr. Mukesh Ambani, who's carrying over the legacy of his father, Mr. Dhirubhai Ambani. These are the leaders, where certainly under the element of personality focused approach, are not getting that respective due that they deserve in the industry. And today it's all about how much is the media talking about you, how much is there a news about you, which is the core focus. And this is what Dr. Covey talks about, that people are looking for quick fixes, and it hasn't changed. uh, it's about one successful organization creating something, and all of a sudden there are people who want to replicate it. If you see, even again going back to the example of White Hat Junior, the moment White Hat Junior came up with the idea of your kid developing an app, there were organizations who just appeared in the market, and all of a sudden everybody's trying to sell a course where you can teach your kids how do you develop an app, and how do you do this, how do you do that. Something that happened with Zomato as well. There were n number of organizations that started off in the food delivery business, similar to what Amazon, and other various organizations. Kind of everybody's looking for shortcuts, uh, and everybody wants to, replicate the success formula that one organization does. So the problem here is the way we see the problem is the problem. That's what Dr. Kobe talks about. That's where there is a need for us to undergo a paradigm shift again, where it's not about just altering our attitude and behavior on the surface level. It needs to be changed. And classic example of this would be, imagine, like, you're driving somewhere, right? You want to go from place A to place B, and you're holding a wrong map. Now, even if you operate from a personality, character where, it doesn't matter where you landed at, you're still enjoying the road, and, you still are somewhere as compared to where you were before. But at the bottom of, at the bottom of everything, you still know you're at the wrong place. So irrespective of how great your attitude is, how positive you are, etc., you still know you're at the wrong place. And that's where the 7 habits comes in, where the first 3 habits are focused totally on self mastery, and that's moving from dependent stage to interdependent stage. And then the habit 4, 5, and 6 talks about bringing that interdependence, where it's focused more on collaboration, it's focused on teamwork, it's focused on helping others grow while you grow with them. And then the 7th habit comes in, which is sharpening the saw. Now, before we deep dive into the 7 habits, there's another concept which needs to be understood so as to implement the 7 habits. And this is a beautiful story that Dr. Covey talks about. And there is this man who has this geese which gives golden eggs every day. I'm sure you must have heard the story. And the first day when he gets this golden egg, he's just surprised and is like, okay, maybe luck. And then he says the geese is giving a golden egg every day. And this man is very happy because all of a sudden he's rich and he's extremely, wealthy, and he can buy whatever he wants. And that's the time when greed sulks in. And he starts thinking that, this geese is giving a golden egg every day. I'm sure there are a lot many golden eggs, inside the geese. So why don't I just cut the geese and just take out all the golden eggs? And in that greed, he kills the golden geese, and guess what? There is nothing inside. So now he's lost the gold and he's lost the geese as well. And that is something which is, probably overlooked in today's world. Something that Covey talks about, productivity versus productive or personal effectiveness. So P/PE. Productivity is what do you produce, and production capability is your ability to produce something. So what is happening today? People are exhausted. Uh, During lockdown, we saw one of the elements where people were really happy initially about getting work from home because now they don't have to commute and they can have a lot of time for themselves, where they can focus on their hobbies and their self help, self growth, their health, their family, everything. And if you observed over a period of 1 year, forget the initial 6, 7 months, everybody was, just haphazardly doing things. But if you see this time of the last 1 year, people are now exhausted because most of them are now working, roughly about 15, 16 hours a day. Absolutely. I mean, the habits have gone for a toss to a large extent. And people are now exhausted, and people are changing jobs from only one perspective, that they are currently feeling exploited in the organization. And that's why the maximum organizations are also taking an advantage, or call it the pressure of being in the market. There is absolutely a line of personal and professional life is just vanished somewhere. So while you get up, the moment you start your systems in the morning till the time you sleep, you're just focused on work, 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 work. Forget the family part of it. You don't even have the time to rejuvenate yourself on basic things. And this is where there is an absolute need for us to move from the personality ethics to the core character ethics. And this is where the foundation happens. And as a part of the foundation, the first habit comes in place, which is about being proactive. Now, we have been hearing people constantly talking about things that are not in their control, right? um, we blame the traffic, we blame the situation, we blame circumstances and all of that stuff. I'll give you an example of this one again. Imagine you're sitting on a dining table, you're having your morning breakfast, and all of a sudden your kid spills the tea on your attire, on your dress that you're supposed to be wearing for the presentation today. Now, in this situation, there are two things happens. One, we immediately, get angry, we shout at the kid, and we confront them, and that immediate blast happens. And then that's how the day goes, one after the other, second event, third event, fourth event, and all of a sudden you feel you're absolutely no control, and the day is just ruining everything. Um, The second situation, imagine the tea fell and now you know that there's nothing you can do about it. All you do is just tell the kid to be a little careful. You go inside, you change, and you come back, and the day goes smooth. Maybe another incident happens, and another incident has happened, but you're simply not reacting. And this is the first paradigm shift that happens, and that's the first habit. It talks about being proactive, taking control of things that you can, you know, um, be responsible for. He calls about this ability as a responsibility, right? And this comes in from the element of the two circles that we are all controlled by, the circle of influence and the circle of concern. Now, to give you an example of the circle of influence and circle of concern, let me just share a small analogy. So imagine you have a soda bottle in your hand and you shake the bottle rigorously and you open the cap. What do you think will happen? The soda will burst out, right? Now imagine you take a water bottle and you shake the bottle in the same way that you shook the soda bottle. Would the water also spill out? The answer is no. The water will simply stay there. The moment you keep the water down, the water will calm down. And that is the difference between being reactive and being proactive. The reactive people would always be like the soda bottle, ready to burst out. Maybe because their ego got hurt, because they felt bad about something, all of that. What they forget is it is not them who's controlling the environment around, it is the environment that is controlling them. So somebody just, for example, a lot of times this happens that somebody just says something and all of a sudden you are really angry and you're really sad and you react to that extent without even realizing that one instance, that one moment, you could have just taken a pause. And after that, you could have assessed the situation and then taken the right decision. The key lesson in this book is to replace the reactive language with the proactive one. When somebody makes angry, etc., just about, we have been hearing this story since our childhood as well. Our mother, our parents have shared this a lot of times that we feel angry, start counting from 10 to 1 backwards. The whole idea behind, that backward count is nothing but to assess the situation that we are in and how do I react next, right? And that's the key lesson here, replacing the reactive ones with a proactive language. Then comes the second one. The next important chapter is beginning with an end in mind. Now, when you read the book a couple of times, you would realize, because a lot of other books, we talk about goal setting as a very, core aspect of everything. Goals are the first thing that everybody needs to set, right? Even for that matter, when you're going for a vacation, when you are, planning to shift to a new city, the first thing you decide is the end destination. Why does Dr. Covey talk about goal settings as chapter 2? Because he understands the element that with a reactive brain, we will not be able to set the right goals. As a reactive person, a lot of times, there are a lot of people that I meet. I'm sure you must have also met a lot of people in your life who would want to, do this, do that, but they end up always giving this one excuse: I don't have time. I have got responsibilities. Only if I had this one support, I would have been able to do that. Again, there is no denial that yes, they are in a dilemma. Each one of us has a responsibility. Each one of us needs to do things which will help us progress and all of that. Um, what we fail to understand is if we do not have the proactive approach about life, we would not be really setting a clear goals for ourselves, because then every goal that we set would be conditional uh, to the environment that you are into. And that's why he's focusing on why should you be proactive in your approach first before you set the goals. So moving to chapter 2, he talks about a clear destination. And I love the idea because he talks about one element, that imagine that you are on your deathbed, right? Imagine you've died and there are people around you and everybody's talking something about you. What is it that you want to hear about yourself? Or what do you think are people talking about you? It's something that he starts with. And that stuck with me for many years. Because whether we like it or we don't like it, that most of us want to leave a legacy behind. We love to talk about great people in our life. We still, till date, there are many, great personalities that we talk about, right? The idea is, what is the kind of legacy that we want to leave behind, where people who remember us would remember us for that. And that's where he talks about setting clear destination in mind, where it's about using our imagination to develop a vision of what we want to become, and how can our subconscious, conscious, and the conscience helps us to achieve that, and what is the kind of values you will build as a person while you reach a destination. So it's not about just reaching the destination, it's also about what kind of person would you want to become while you do that. And I have these two classic names. Whenever I read this chapter 2, I get these two classic names in my mind. And one is Ratan Tata ji by default, a man of extremely high value and extreme, I think there are no words which can define his values as a person. And the second is Mr. and Mrs. Murthy, the founder of Infosys. So Sudha Murthy ji has equally been supportive and had played a crucial role in building Infosys. Now, when we talk about value, we're talking about people, legendary people, like Mr. and Mrs. Murthy, and we're talking about Sri Ratan Tata ji about this. And this is what Habit 2 primarily talks about. It's not about just a goal. It's not about just a financial goal that you want to achieve. It's not just about a health goal that you want to achieve. It talks about an element that what is the vision that you create for yourself, and what is the kind of person you become when you're trying to accomplish something. And this is applicable to us as individuals, as an organization as well. So again, when you look at the key lesson here, it's about letting yourself free to visualize as much possibly in detail about who you want to be, what is the kind of person you want to be, what is the kind of values you want to inculcate, what are the different roles you want to play, whether it is your personal life, your professional lives, your social life, your community, in all areas, what are the goals you want to achieve. And then addressing the fact that scares you, because one of the biggest reason for we not able to achieve our goals is our fear, the fear of failure, the fear of what people will think about us. And then drawing small steps that will take us closer to the goal that we want to achieve in our life. It's not about doing something great, it's not about starting something phenomenal. It's about taking that first step. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. It's about taking that first step towards the journey that you want to accomplish. And this is where the goal setting happens. Now, once you set the goal, what next? Obviously, there are a lot of areas we want to set goals. And, there would be financial goals. There would be, this 5 years goal. There would be this 10 years goals. There would be this 1 week goal. So there are a lot of goals. Now, the next element that comes is how do you prioritize them? So putting first thing first. And Dr. Covey explains the concept of the 4 quadrants. As professionals, most of us are aware of these quadrants. These are the quadrants which talks about the urgent and important, the quadrant 1, where 90% of time, each of us as professionals are there. These are tasks which are extremely urgent, and these tasks are important as well. You can't escape them. So you have to do it. The second quadrant is the most important element for us, which is it's not urgent, but it's important. So it's about deciding. It's about, this is where the real planning happens. This is where we set our, priorities in terms of what do you want to achieve, what is the thing that you want to do. That's the second quadrant. The third quadrant is something which is urgent but not important, like most of the meetings that we attend. So most of the meetings are urgent. Most of the phone calls are urgent. Uh, and this is where we cannot deny that, and we need to address, we need to take care of that. But that can be delegated as well. And the last is not important, not urgent, something that we need to delete. And this 4 quadrants helps us to understand where do we stand. Now, a lot of times people people procrastinate things, and when they have an opportunity from moving from quadrant 2 to quadrant 1, or probably, when they have an opportunity from moving from quadrant 2 to get things done, because they procrastinate, they end up in quadrant 1. And this is where the pressure comes in. This is where the urgency comes in. This is where the need to deliver comes in. And there is a book called as Eat the Frog. And if you're really wanting to get rid of procrastination habits, highly recommended book. Even Dr. Covey talks about, this element of applying the 80-20 principle in our life. So again, this is a book, 80-20 principle, where this is a Pareto's principle, and Dr. Covey talks about looking at tasks with the highest efficiency. The book talks about, the 80-20 principle talks about that 20% of your efforts will give you 80% result. And this is where the magic happens. So a lot of times people end up spending 80% of their time on 20% tasks, which may not give them the results. And there is this 20% task which could give you 80% results. These are called as the high value task. So there are low value tasks and high value tasks, and most of the time we do not, in fact most of the time we don't even qualify them. But if you focus your time on the high value task, you would have maximum benefits with minimal inputs. So the key lesson here again is to identify, your quadrant 2 activities, focusing on, things that are important but not urgent. So you can plan, you can prioritize, and then you can start having your own time management metrics where you set timers for things that needs their own time and you function accordingly on those lines. And this is where the first part ends, the personal victory, what he calls us. Now, once you take up the personal victory, we move to the second domain, which is the public victory. And this is where the fourth habit comes in, which is think win-win. Now, again, one of the biggest dilemma today is everybody wants to have a higher profit share, whether it is in terms of money, whether it is in terms of value or any other area. In fact, look at interviews as well. So the HR is negotiating with the candidate so that they can save money for the organization. And, the candidate is trying to negotiate with the HR thinking I might get a little better package. And sometimes in that process, we lose out on good candidates. And sometimes in the process of, this bargain, the candidate loses a good offer, right? And there are four situations. Practically, there are six, but there are the major four, which is something called as a win-win situation, where both the people win. So rare situation, but the agreement comes in, solution comes in where both are very happy. So both the parties are satisfied, mutually agreed, win-win situation. Then there is a win-lose situation. Win-lose is I win, you lose. Now, this kind of people where I win, you lose, they're really prone to use the position or the power or credentials, and they want to just step up on the other ones only for their profit. So they don't really care about what is the loss you get or what happens, etc. The third category is the lose win, where it's the person is behaving like a doormat, where he's okay to let go of his let go of his profit as well, and he's just wanting to please the other person, where he just he bows down to the authority and he says, okay, I lose, you win. And then there is a lose-lose. So both of them are adamant, both of them want the better, um, the better the share, or better pie, I would say. And in that process both of them lose. And then there's another element which is either a win-win or a no deal. So either they shake hands or there is absolutely no deal at all. Now, obviously, the best option is to create win-win situation, but doesn't happen most of the time. Now, when there are absolutely no deal, there is an element that the relationship is still maintained. There could be a possible agreement or arrangements in the near future, which can help the deal to take in place. But to take a win-win situation, there are two factors that he talks about needs absolute attention. And the first is consideration for the other person. And the second is courage to say no, right? So when you look at this factor, this comes in, the consideration, the courage factor comes in from the element of something called as an abundance mentality, where I believe there is a share for everybody. but most people operate from the scarcity mentality. So where it is about, this is you know this is the only thing available. If it doesn't happen now, it will never happen, and all that element. So people tend to, like, get that deal for themselves. You see how this, in fact, Independence Day is just tomorrow, and you see all this big organizations or marketing campaigns where everybody is trying to create this element of it's now or never offer. So that mentality, this element, okay, I'm getting the 70% off, let me just buy it. It comes from a scarcity mentality. Obviously, we also know that this kind of sales and offers would come on, regular basis. Every festival, there would be some offer. But, this element of create that scarcity mentality, scarcity element drives people to run and get that offer. So the key lesson here is think about interactions from a perspective of agreement, solution, and not just from a perspective of winning. Um, Look at the core relationships that you have and think about what could you give in that relationship instead of what can you gain from that relationships. And that's where, the think win-win happens. Habit 5 is more about seek first to understand, then to be understood, right? A very simple element where, Dr. Covey gives a very simple example. See, in any communication, we spend 10% on words. 30% happens through our sounds, through our tone. The remaining 60% is through our body language. A core element which is missing in that is people don't pay attention to the 90% of non-verbal communication. And listening contributes a major part of it. Not just hearing the person, it's about putting ourselves in the other person's shoes and feeling what they feel. A lot of times people end up giving sympathy, but that's not what people are looking for. Sometimes it's about understanding what is the person going through. If I were in that situation, what would I be doing is an element that people need to look at. And that's what, this chapter talks about, the habit 5, where it's about practicing empathetic listening. Um, so the next time you're watching actually two people, it would be a good idea. Just keep yourself, or probably, just cover your eyes and just look at their body language, see the way they are talking. You would find out that most of the time what they say and what the body language is communicating are two different elements. The next time you're giving a presentation, try to build in that element of empathy. A lot of times we get nervous. A lot of times the audience get nervous about uh, giving a presentation. It's about giving somebody an element that, what, don't worry, I've been in that situation. Just focus on the presentation and the key points. The 6th habit talks about synergizing and working with each other, right? It's an element where, comes in from the win-win situation where I collaborate with you, you collaborate with me. Together, we focus on the larger goals. Synergizing is not about just submitting to something or just, commanding others to follow you. When we talk about the leadership element, when we talk about the synergizing, it allows people to work with each other at the best of their ability. Synergy is where you trust each other. Synergy is where you work with somebody without, figuring out who's taking the credit. A classic example of this are, cricket games. You could have an individual batsman scoring a century, but if the team loses, that century holds no value because you either win as a team or you lose as individuals. Synergy gives you this element of working with others where it allows people to be creative, to figure out solutions, and to understand, work with them. And also an element that, when you're synergizing with somebody, you have to understand the route that not every person is going to think and act the way you would expect them to. Every person has a different wavelength that they come from. Like we talked about the abundance mentality, the scarcity mentality, the attitude, the behavior, their upbringing, their environment, everything contributes to that. As a person, When you're looking at working at somebody, you have to look at what are the strength that they bring on the table, and together how can we overcome our weakness. A classic example of synergizing is, the modern day, the rabbit and the tortoise story, where, in the old time we have seen the rabbit and the tortoise going for a race, and the rabbit sleeps off and the tortoise wins. But in the modern corporate story, you know they have multiple races, and towards the end they have a race together, where, the rabbit says, when there is a land, I'll take you on my back, and when there is water, you take me on your back, and together they run the race. And that's a classic example of synergy, where you offer your strength to somebody, and when in areas where you have a weakness, you allow the other person to take over. It's not about who's great, it's about focusing on the end result. And this is the public victory. The last habit is about sharpening the saw. I'll just close this chapter with a small story. Um, so there is this woodcutter, and I'm sure you must have heard this story 100 times before. And he's cutting the woods, right? And over a period of time, his productivity is decreasing. And there's another woodcutter whose productivity is increasing and is consistent over a period of time. So he approaches the other woodcutter and asks him, what is it that you're doing different? And he says, I am struggling. The woodcutter says, I'm struggling because I'm working harder than you, but you manage to cut more trees than I do. How is that possible? So the smarter woodcutter says, show me your axe. And he says, there is the axe does not have any power. When do you sharpen your axe? He says, I don't have the time to sharpen my axe. And that's where the lesson is. If you don't take the time to sharpen your axe, whether it is your spiritual life, whether it is your physical life, whether it is your, professional life, if you don't sharpen your axe, you will be left behind. And today's world demands us to be, absolutely, knowledgeable and wise in whatsoever we do in our work. And that's what seventh habit talks about. It's about you taking the time out to eat well, to take enough rest, to relax, to focus on your meditation, to read. That's one element. It helps us. And then how do you, work with others? How do you spend your time with others? Share your knowledge, share your experience, and how do you collaborate? How do you learn and work with each other? So this is a short summary and the key lessons from the 7 habits of highly effective people. I hope you all enjoyed listening as much as I enjoyed, sharing these elements. Yes, I owe a large part of, my corporate success and my personal success as well to this book. I would highly recommend you take this book. It's available on Amazon right now also. Uh, go read the book, and please do share your comments in the next session when we start off, on how did you find this book. And if there is anything you want to talk about more about this book, you can connect with me offline as well. So thank you for patiently listening. And now for the next announcement. As I had mentioned in the first blog, that we are doing this best reader of the month, where you have an opportunity to be the best storyteller. So now I would be happy to see if there is anybody volunteering for the next book that they would love to read. We have a WhatsApp group as well. If you're not on the group, please connect with us on that. And there we share the updates, we share the ideas. So do let us know by tomorrow who would like to read the next book and what book would you read. We would be connecting again next Saturday at 7 p.m. We would be sharing the link for the same. Thank you for being a wonderful audience, guys. Keep reading, keep sharing, and do invite your friends on this club if you think they love book reading as much as you do. Thank you so much. God bless. Take care. We still have like a few seconds left. If anybody wants to share anything, we'd be happy to hear that.
Thank you very much, Praddeep.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kavita. Thank you, Sonali.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Yash. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Shreya. We'll connect soon. See you. Take care.
Thanks, Pradeep. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys on the clubhouse. It was nice to have you here. Right? We would be connecting with you all shortly. Take care. Enjoy.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye. Good night.
Good night. Bye.
Bye.